Then you share.
Tá.
We go again.
This share.
All right. We have a PowerPoint presentation prepared.
Yeah, we have a PowerPoint.
Guys, it's all, oh yeah, it was all dark.
Yeah.
Now it's back again. Okay.
Can you see the PowerPoint? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So as Fran was saying, for those who don't know us, so Fran and I and Flavia, we started this study group 3 years ago. So we used to meet in Miranda, and because of COVID, we started studying online. And so we completed another basic study, and now we are proceeding with our study with this book, which has been written by Allan Kardec, and the name of the book is What is Spiritism? So it's a book that will explain and will go details by details about Spiritism and who was Allan Kardec. So for tonight, we are going to cover page 7 to page 17. And we are going to start talking about the biography of Allan Kardec. So just before we start, I think we still have like 1 or 2 physical books. Yeah, we have 2 physical books in paperback if someone would like to buy. But you can find the PDF online, or you can buy the Kindle version. And the Kindle version, you don't need the Kindle device. You can download the Kindle app, and then this way you can read in your phone, in your tablet, or sometimes even in your computer. So we have another person joining us tonight.
Welcome, Livia.
Welcome, Livia. Thank you for joining us.
Just talk about the times we're joining for people who come.
There's Angela also joined us.
Yeah.
So we have Livia, Angela, Duncan, Elliot. I think they're all new.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome everyone. So I think we'll just briefly explain how the study will go so you know what to expect. So we're planning on just having 45-minute sessions. So that includes an opening and a closing meditation. Because we do use the free version of Zoom, what we might have to do is at the end of the session, towards the end, we might let you know when to disconnect and reconnect, but you're using the same meeting ID and password. But yeah, this book is divided in 3 main chapters. So the first, we started with the introduction, which is a biography of Allan Kardec by Henry Sauce. So he was someone that really studied the actual facts about his life. And then the first chapter is all about dialogues between Kardec, and there was a critic, a skeptic, a priest. So basically people who, I guess, not only didn't understand a little bit about Spiritism, but disputed that anything that he was doing was truth. So Kardec actually answers some core arguments there, so it's pretty good. The second chapter is a lot of the experiments that Kardec has done by asking different mediums all over the world and developing what we call the universal method of assuring that the facts were true. So it's kind of a summary of the medium's book and explains the phenomena of mediumship and how the information that he codified in the books was obtained. And the third chapter is a synthesis of the Spirit's book, which is one of the foundation books from Spiritism, which is basically the consolidation of the questions and answers that Kardec decided to put in a logical method to actually explain the Spiritist philosophy in depth. So we have a program that we can share with you all. If you guys would like to send us a quick message with your email, we can send you the PDF, or you can find it in our Facebook page under our menu, whatever is easier for you. But you can feel free to join us if you would like to, before we do the initial meditation at 8 p.m. If you like to join us around 7:50, we like just reading a message and harmonizing or chatting for a couple minutes before we start, so we can get to know everyone better. But if you want to join us until a little bit later today, we can do that as well, and you can ask questions after we reconnect. But yeah, this is us, so we will continue then. Thank you.
Yeah. So, just on the beginning of the book, so the real name of Allan Kardec, it's Hippolyte Léon Denisard Rivail. So the name of Allan Kardec, we can talk about that a little bit later, but that's the real name. So a lot of people would refer to Allan Kardec as a Rivail. So he was born on October 3rd in 1804 in Lyon, France. And he was a son of a judge. So Professor Rivail started his education in Lyon, and then he moved to Switzerland. And it's interesting to start talking about that, because if you think about, it's more than 200 years ago. So the world was completely different by then. And he came from a very traditional and stable family of like a judge, and with his mother. So he wasn't like poor, he was very well educated, and he was so intelligent and so dedicated to his studies that he became quickly one of the most eminent pupils of Professor Pestalozzi. So for those who had the opportunity to read something about Pestalozzi, Pestalozzi was like a very modern educator back in the day. So his method was very advanced on education. And Rivail was study his method, and he became one of the most intellectual professors. And he started teaching other kids when he was 14 years old. So he was super young, but he learned a lot, and he started a career as a professional in an early age.
So I think I might just add, I'm not sure if you guys had researched a little bit about educational methods like this, but nowadays, if you look at, for example, the Montessori method for educating kids, which is founded on a child-centered approach and respecting their individuality, respecting them basically as human beings, and not using any negative punishment, that kind of approach. So imagine 200 years ago how children used to be educated. There was a lot of punishment, there was a lot of physical abuse, I guess, in a way, because I guess adults didn't understand that kids were still developing. They didn't know, discipline. So there was a lot of that imposition of discipline. And Pestalozzi wanted to have kids learn to love, to explore, learn to ask questions. So he used a lot of those methods of opening them to be curious and to explore and to doing things in a more open way. And Rivail had the same inquisitive personality. So he quickly became very dedicated in, I guess, sharing what he learned when he was under his tutorship. So I think just so we can put it into a context.
Kardec, Fran, you guys just broke like for about 30 seconds. We couldn't hear anything.
That's okay. Sorry about that. I just hope that gave you guys an insight, a brief insight about the methods, though. Just that, he used to let kids explore and follow their passions, and he was never punishing them or applying discipline like the old methods they used to use. It was more about treating them as human beings first and foremost, and respecting them, and creating a bond, I guess, and trust.
Yeah, and that's important because that was the environment of Rivail. That's how he he became a professor. And as a professor, he was member of several learned societies, and he was an author of like a lot of books. So, as you can see, there is a list of the books that he published. Um, so, along his teaching career, he also worked as an accountant for trading industry, and he was married in February 32 at 28 years old.
Which was probably very old for that time.
Yeah, considerably.
Considering.
And here, just to show the type of character of Allan Kardec or Rivail at the time. So he used to organize free courses of chemistry, physics, astronomy, uh, comparative autonomy, anatomy, which were highly attended from 35 to 40. So imagine back in the day, he was open his house for free education for anyone who would like to attend. If nowadays it's super hard to find like free education, imagine 200 years ago where the people barely could read, and he was like already sharing his time and his knowledge, educating people. So that was very interesting. And we need to,
Well,
yeah,
I remember like when I was reading a long time ago, he mastered about 11 subjects. Not just those ones you just mentioned, but it was about 11 subjects he used to teach.
Yeah, and he spoke
It's a lot.
five languages fluently. And so French was his native language, of course, but he spoke German, English, and Dutch fluently. So he was very intelligent, very dedicated, I guess, in his life.
yeah. And if you we go back time and we think what was happening that time, so the world population was um, stop believing in God or in the spirituality, and we can remember on the history books that the people was just living the moment. So they have a very hard time to believe in anything. And out of the blue, so a phenomena starts happening in France. So they call this phenomena as turning tables. And that become very popular. And these meetings would attract a lot of people because they would like to see the tables moving, and the tables would go up and go down and go side by side, and it was like an entertainment event back in the day. And so it wasn't like a serious study or anything.
In high society.
Yeah, and it was,
Yeah, it was popular. Like you would go to coffee shops and places, and people were just sitting around tables and watching them dance. But also, some very high society figures used to hold those meetings privately in their homes, like seance meetings, to watch this physical phenomena.
yeah. And as you can imagine, a lot of people, they disbelieve that. They think it was a fraud, and they used to go to this meeting just to to find out if it was real or if it was a fraud. And so the first time Alan, Professor Review heard about these turning tables, he said, "No, that's impossible." So yeah, he wasn't interested at all. But then more people around his inner circle start going to these meetings, and a really good friend of him start going, and he said, you have to go, like it's real. And so he went for the first time, and he was very intrigued how a table could move. So he thought was magnetism. So do you know, like have like a systems or something behind the floor who could move the tables? But then he realized there is nothing, in different tables, in different houses, in different coffee shops, as Fran said, um, was acting the same way. So and you can see a picture of like a group of people and a table in the middle, and the table is shaking. So it's very interesting to think about that 200 years ago.
Bit. I haven't studied this. Will?
Yeah.
Okay, you guys broke again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We apologize.
Maybe do you wanna have maybe a phone going at the same time, Fran?
No, I think
As your
it's
computer?
impossible.
Yeah.
No?
No, unfortunately.
Okay.
Sometimes it might break, but if it breaks for a couple of seconds, we always can come back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So after
All right.
he started going to these meetings, he started thinking what could cause the table to turn. And people start asking questions to the table. So one knock will say yes, two knocks will say no, and people will ask questions and get answers. And he was very intrigued with that. So he knew like a table would have a brain to answer that. And because of that, he starts going more and more to these meetings to try to understand what was happening there. So he has his doubts, like hesitation, he didn't believe. But after, oops, after so many meetings and getting the answers, he understood there's something behind these meetings. And as a lot of like very intelligent and very respectable people was getting behind these meetings and starting like small groups, more interesting in knowing what was the cause instead of just the entertainment. That someday he joined a group.
Has anyone seen it? We broke again.
Yeah. Am I back?
So I was just saying that, Netflix has a movie about Kardec's life, which is probably a good reference. It's actually what you thought about the movie, Will. Pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's called Kardec, yeah, and it's
Yeah, it's called
a very
Kardec.
big summary of
Yeah.
all these events. So yeah, it's worth checking.
Yep. So, sorry. Yeah. So when he got very into these turning table sessions and the invisible force of the manifestations, he understood that there are some knowledge and some intelligence behind the systems. So then a small group, they create this tool, which was like a basket with they can put a pencil on top, and then the mediums would put their hands on top of like this device, and instead of like shaking the table, the spirits would move the basket, and they start riding. And now that the spirits could write, so Allan Kardec was able to ask more sophisticated questions. And he understood the spirit who was writing the message was a human soul, someone who has died, like the physical body has died, and as a spirit he come and he starts communicating with these groups. And as they evolved the questions, they start getting different answers, and some answers was like very sophisticated to be just like from the knowledge of like the kids who was holding the basket.
So there were two main mediums that worked on this beginning of the codification. So that's what's on the slide.
Yeah.
So there were Julie and Caroline Baudin. So they were very young mediums, 14 and 16-year-olds. And they could help with their mediumship to receive the messages through automatic writing later on. So the spirits started showing the phenomena physically because they needed to prove that something was being manifested. But once they encountered in Kardec someone that was serious enough to ask the right questions, to take it seriously, they decided to then start providing the answers, and they started inspiring him as well to understand what was the best method to do so. So he, being the great educator that he was, he started thinking of a logical way to ask the questions, from like the most important thing to the least important, or in a way that would make sense to explain these laws of life and these different things that they were getting in the messages, but in a way that was easy to follow for someone who was trying to understand that information.
Yeah, and in this small group, which basically was like a family and two teenagers, and the answers that these two teenagers would start providing to the questions was so impressive that Allan Kardec starts writing and recording everything from every single questions and the answers, and he would ask the same question in a different way, but the question would be very similar, and he was getting the same answers or similar answers. And because of that, he understood there was not just one spirit, but multiple spirits who would say the same thing in a different way. So he would collect all the answers for the same questions or very similar questions, and he would find the same meaning of the answer.
Yeah, and basically that's how they started the idea of the Spirits book, which is the book that we have available nowadays, a question and answer book. You can look up topics alphabetically. You can go via the main chapters, subheadings, and so forth. But everything about life, questions about who we are, what is our origin as spirits, what is our destination, what are we doing here, and then all these mechanisms of life. So why are we born? And the main fundamentals of Spiritism is in the introduction of this book as well, which a lot of people skip and go straight to the questions. But the introduction of the Spirits book is probably one of the best ways to understand what is Spiritism, and we're going to cover that in the course here as well. But
and all the methodology that he used is on the Spirits book. But the other thing very interesting. So all this phenomena of like turning tables has evolved, and the spirits who used to be behind of like shaking the tables and turning the tables, they're just trying to show us as a incarnated society that there's way more after life. And once Kardec understood that was a communication, he started getting prepared for his first book. And the logic that he used to validate his work was asking the same questions to different groups. And he was getting like very similar answers from different spirits and from different groups,
Different mediums.
different mediums. Yeah. So because of that, the universal truth that he wrote, it's very concise, I would say, because wasn't right or wrote for one person, but he used ask the questions and collect different answers and compile that in the book.
So we have to run everyone
Yeah.
all the time.
So that was the first part of the book. I would recommend everyone to get a copy or trying to find a PDF to read, because that's like a very short version, not detailed.
Yeah, and like Flavia mentioned, the Netflix movie that they've made is really good.
Yeah.
And for anyone that joined us today for the first time, if you want to send us a quick message via Facebook or via email, we can send you the PDF that Will has found as well.
Yeah.
We can send it to you, Rihanna, as well,
Yeah.
of the book. And there's also a couple links of very good documentaries that we know the source of. So it might be helpful to visualize this context of where Kardec came from as well. So there's a documentary from the US Spiritist Federation that's pretty good, that has some detailed information. But we would like to invite everyone to continue to have our meditation following now as a conclusion to tonight's. But this connection is gonna drop.
And,
so
yeah.
if you can reconnect the same meeting ID and same password, then we can do our final vibration and our healing meditation together before we finish.
See you guys in 1 minute.
We'll all reconnect in a second then. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
You.